That slideshow is a great reminder of what a good-looking kid that Andrew was, despite the 70s and 80s dress styles. A lot of bad outfits in there, Mom and Dad. Well, especially the ones Christy was wearing. But glad you're here this afternoon. These are the worst experiences to have. It makes it a little better when you go through it with other people. And so this is one of those rituals we do. We get together, we mourn, we celebrate, we cry, we feel deep anguish, we have questions, confusion, and it's going to be there no matter what. But knowing that you can do that with other people around, not just today, but those of you that have been involved with the family for weeks leading up to this, and will continue to be, all that is part of the story that feels like a tragedy. And so today there's a chance to reflect and feel some hope, but also to feel despair and to feel sadness and to know that it's all part of it, but to not have to do it alone. And that's powerful. So on behalf of the family and friends, thank you for whatever role you've played leading up to today, and post. Andrew is someone who I got to know a little bit in college because of Christy and because of our relationship. And then I got to know him a lot better when we became adults, and he had realized his dream of teaching math was not going to happen. He was good at it. The kids loved him at doing it, but he felt like it wasn't going to work with this part of his life that was difficult. That was his journey with epilepsy. And so he couldn't teach. And it was part of that journey of figuring out what's next. And so he and I got to connect in our mid-20s. During that time, closer than we had before because he was looking for the next thing. I had just happened to work for a place that was helping people figure out what's next. Through that job, primarily through my interaction with Andrew, I learned so much that changed the trajectory of my career for the next almost 20 years, but also changed who I was as a person. Andrew embodied resiliency, stick-with-itness, stubbornness, positivity, and this attitude at times that was just kind of like, well, all right, what's next? Yeah, that wasn't good, but let's just keep going. Just kind of right in the middle. That was a lesson to learn. As we got to know each other closely, got to see what it was like for him in the work world, especially with his epilepsy, begin to notice that he was fighting a battle that most of us haven't had to fight, thankfully, because not only was he fighting the stigma of, oh, he has this condition and people don't know what it looks like and how it works and what should they do, and there's apprehension there to hire him or work with him. He also had to handle the internal struggle of what's going to happen if I have a seizure somewhere, and the embarrassment or the safety. And he's dealing with those things, and somehow through all that, was still the embodiment of fall down 7, get up 8. And because of that, and because of the ability to roll with the punches, that's the person you want to be an advocate for, you want to be an ally for, you want to speak up for. And so I learned that, the importance of that role. That changed my career forever. That put me into social work. That and his annoying sister talking about social work all the time, at every step. But seeing him not want help, and he's the one who needs the help, made you want to help even more. And seeing his appreciative nature. This is not a joke. There's probably thousands of kids in Hamilton County, around where Chattanooga is, Tennessee, who know about Andrew's story, because that was part of my job. Was to try and educate and share part of his story so so that other 10-year-olds or 20 or 50 would know that they weren't alone, would know that what they were facing could be fought, to know that it was going to be a journey, it was going to be struggles, it was going to be falling down, it was going to be embarrassment at times, it was going to be pain, but there was a way to manage it, and there was a way to live, and I had a good friend who was doing all those things. If anyone had an excuse to get down and out and to be depressed and to be angry, it was him, and he fought it for decades. So, I'm so proud to have known him, so thankful for what he taught me in my life. And I have those questions of why God, why Andrew? And that's normal, and many of us feel the same way. I just want to highlight the resiliency and the fighter that he was, and I choose to reflect on that. And welcome to you that are here to do some of those same things. Thank you for being here with us. Say a little prayer. God, thank you for knowing our hearts. For seeing everything, for knowing everything, for knowing the struggles on small planes that we face, the big ones, the times when we feel overwhelmed and the times when we're joyous, everything in between. Thank you for being a God who's there for it, who's there to offer comfort and support, and in dark and difficult times. Thank you for being a rock and salvation for us to cling to. Thank you for the people that you put in our lives to cling to. Thank you for the community of believers, non-believers, everything in between that we can still cling to during difficult times. So thank you for that support. Help us to be the support that we need to be. Thank you for the life of Andrew. Thank you for the influence. And thank you for this tough, horrible day that we get to share with each other. And we pray for hope. Amen.
Andrew Cliffton Young, age 48, was born on December 16, 1977, in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He passed away on March 27th after a long and complex journey, leaving behind a family who cherished him deeply and will carry his memory forward. Andrew was the beloved firstborn son of Steve and Donna Young of Gentry, Arkansas, and a devoted brother to Christy and Tron Wilder, Brooke Young, and Courtney and Amanda Young. He was a treasured uncle to Ace and Jude Wilder, Kingston and Theo McWhite, Hayden, Jessica, Weston, Ellie, and Demi Young, and a great uncle to Aiden, Benny, and Sonny. He was preceded in death by his paternal grandparents, Bill and Wanda Young, in addition to his immediate family. He survived by numerous aunts, uncles, and cousins. Andrew lived a life marked not by ease, but by extraordinary resolve. For decades, he fought a hard and often invisible battle with epilepsy, a struggle that shaped the course of his life but never defined him. Though the condition limited some of the paths he might have taken, it never diminished the way he showed up for others. To know Andrew was to feel seen. He had a rare ability to be fully present with people, to listen, to notice, and to care in ways that made others feel valued. He was kind, thoughtful, introspective, and wise. Andrew loved words and used them with care. He had a natural precision with language. Even as a child, his siblings remember him gently, and sometimes not so gently, correcting their grammar. That attentiveness stayed with him throughout his life, reflecting his sharp mind. Andrew was an avid reader and lifelong learner who could often be found with a Kindle in hand. He was also a patient and enthusiastic teacher, especially when it came to chess. He spent countless hours teaching his siblings, nieces, and nephews how to play, moments that would now become treasured memories. If given the chance, each of them would gladly sit down with one more game for Uncle Andy. Above all, Andrew loved his family with a deep and selfless devotion. He showed up in quiet, steady ways. His life was a testament to resilience, humility, and love. Though his journey was not without hardship, Andrew's journey is one of perseverance and character. He made an impact not through grand accomplishments, but through the way he lived with intention, compassion, and a presence in the lives of those he loved. He will be dearly missed and forever remembered.
Come with heart here open, for in my hour of darkness I may be seeking the joy of love unspoken. O Lord, be thou near to me.
And the holy voices sing hallelujah.
Ever will thy reign be, as I wander through this life.
O Lord, be thou near to me.
Though in this burden our hearts breaking, yet in the shadows still a light I see. Maker's love is not forsaken. O Lord, be thou near to me.
And the holy voices sing hallelujah.
Ever will thy reign be, as I wander through this life.
O Lord, be thou near to me. And the holy voices sing hallelujah.
Ever will thy reign be, as I wander through this life.
O Lord, be thou near to me.
O Lord, be thou near
think I look fine in the slideshow. I don't know what Shaughnessy's talking about. I thought we all looked pretty good. But I don't know whose idea it is to have a slideshow right before we're supposed to get up here and talk. But I was recently reminded by a dear friend that our brother's name means courage. So we are going to muster up a little courage from him and try to do something, because it's really important to share who he was in our lives. One of the things that's helpful or gives you comfort in grief is time together and sharing, and that's all we've done the last 2 months, is talk about Andrew and share memories and laugh and cry and pull out way more photos than any of you wanted to sit down and watch today, but we're sorry.
We enjoyed it.
We enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And so we're going to invite you now in our sibling reflection to just come join us and enjoy some of our memories that we really cherish. So I'm Christy, or as Andrew called me, Love, the sister who completely disrupted his 15 months of life. And this is Brooke, or as he referred to, Beautiful, who 5 years later disrupted mine. And Courtney, who Andrew referred to as Wussy, the one who for a while none of us even noticed had joined the chaos. I think there were photos that showed that. A lot. There are some who will try to say that Andrew did not take my arrival well, but if these stories are true, it was the only period in our relationship where Andrew and I didn't get along. We were inseparable. When Brooke and Courtney came along, Andrew and I tried to preserve our little two-person world for as long as possible. One of the ways we did this was by using Pig Latin to speak to each other without them knowing what was being said. And for a while it worked. But eventually they started recognizing when we'd say their names. So we adapted. Brooke, or as we were saying, Ukbray, and she was like, stop talking about me. She became Pam, and we would say Ampay. And then Courtney was Ortney K, and so we changed it to John and became Anjay. And Andrew and I just talk away, and they had no idea we were talking about them anymore. So it worked really well. John and Pam are our cousins, and so they just, I guess, thought we were talking about our cousins. Andrew and I spent entire days in the woods behind our house, leaving in the morning and not coming back until dinner. Those adventures sometimes led us into fields with rats, trails with snakes, and occasionally into situations where we were completely lost. And for those of you who know me, I strongly dislike rats and snakes, but I never questioned the plan when Andrew was in charge. I trusted him completely. And with good reason. He never left home without his Swiss Army knife. I followed him everywhere, and sometimes following Andrew meant doing things that, in hindsight, really don't make a lot of sense. Like the time we snuck 2 sticks of butter behind his bed to eat. Why butter, I truly have no idea. Thankfully, we were caught before we could finish, and our parents were not nearly as impressed with our choices as we were. For whatever reason, his bed became our headquarters for things we didn't want other people to be a part of. It was easy to sneak behind his headboard and disappear into our own little world. Like the time he showed me a special knife that belonged to our dad. It was, by special, I mean it was dangerous. It had a really long, thin blade, but he was really excited by this knife and he wanted to show it to me. So it's like, meet me behind the bed, and he pulls out this knife, and as he's like, we can't do this very long because Mom and Dad might see us. So as he goes to slide it in, instead of it sliding back into the sleeve or the case for the knife, it slices his finger. So I'm like, no problem, I'll go get Band-Aids, because that's what the situation needed. So I'm quickly crawling up on the toilet seat, reaching for the Band-Aids, and here comes Mom. What's wrong? Who needs Band-Aids? And I'm like, oh, nothing, we're fine, Andrew's just bleeding a little. She did not trust us, which was probably a good thing, so she went in to assess the situation. Turns out he needed stitches, so it was a good thing she used her mama instinct. We also spent a lot of time at what Andrew called the clubhouse, which was really just a tiny shack out in a field. Under Andrew's leadership, there was a strict no girls allowed policy, with one very important exception, me. Andrew and I were always creating something. We used to make magic videos. We used Mom's tiny indoor trampoline and figured out that if I jumped and pulled a blanket over myself midair, Andrew could stop the camera, switch places with me, start filming again, and suddenly, voila, Christy had magically turned into Andrew by turning the camera on and off. We thought we were cinematic geniuses. We'd spend hours planning them, filming them, trying to figure out camera tricks, and for a while, I think Brooke and Courtney were fully convinced it was magic because we wouldn't let them watch us make them. Then the original Nintendo dropped, and we were hooked. We would get up before the sun had even risen and play Mario Brothers on this tiny black and white TV in Andrew's room. I have no idea how Andrew got permission to have a TV, except that he is definitely our parents' favorite. But we had this TV in his room somehow, and we definitely weren't supposed to be playing Nintendo before school, but somehow this setup existed for several weeks. Andrew and I became students of Mario Brothers. We didn't believe in warping. Anyone who skipped levels was basically cheating in our minds. We studied every level, every hidden coin, every trick to conquer the princess the right way. I can't even remember which one of us finally beat it first because nothing ever felt competitive between us. It was always ours. At night, after we were supposed to be in bed, we would sneak into each other's rooms and talk until we heard our dad's diesel truck pull in, and then sprint back to our rooms like our lives depended on it. When I think about that season of our lives, I genuinely don't remember getting tired of each other or doing much of anything separately. I had a built-in best friend, and it was awesome. I'm fine. In fact, Andrew starting school was the first time our togetherness was disrupted, and I was lost. I mean, I had Brooke and Courtney, but let's be honest, they were not Andrew. He knew how much I missed him because I was relentless about trying to convince Mom and Dad that I should also be allowed to start school, but they weren't convinced. So Andrew came up with a solution. I'll just teach you everything I'm learning. And he did. I have no idea where he procured a flip chart from, but he got a flip chart, we'd sit in his bed, and he would write out spelling words and definitions and read every book to me that he'd been reading at school. And when I finally got to first grade, I was placed in a second grade reading group with him, which was only important because we were back together. Andrew was my first teacher. And the truth is, he never stopped teaching me. I actually believe our first teacher is here today, Mrs. Lambert. So I'd be remiss if I didn't give her a little shout out, because I think it's safe to say Andrew was always her favorite, and he was never shy about how much he loved her.
I think all of us spent most of our childhood trying to get into Andrew's world somehow. Christy already had full access. Brooke eventually figured out how to get her way in. I was mostly just trying to get into whatever room he was in. I was lucky enough to share a room with him, but make no mistake, it was Andrew's room. We didn't have movie stars, athletes, or supermodels on our wall. We had Albert Einstein, the periodic table of elements, workout routines, real cool stuff. And we actually still have the Einstein poster, the original one, fun fact. And if Andrew had a friend over and kicked me out of the room, I had a strategy. I'd stand outside the door and yell, "I need something." He'd crack the door, and boom, I was back in. Christy mentioned their magic videos, but Andrew also produced many action films, and I desperately wanted to be in one of his movies. After enough begging, Andrew finally gave me a role. My instructions were basically lay down, shut up, and play dead. Which I did brilliantly, I might add, only to later discover my Oscar-worthy performance did not even make the final cut. I had been outsmarted once again. We had bunk beds, and that they were perpendicular. Andrew on the bottom, me on the top, and every morning I had a routine. I would wake up, jump from the top bunk directly onto Andrew's bed. One morning I woke up and he was sprawled out across the entire mattress, no landing space. So I woke him up and said, "Andrew, move over, I need to pee." And he told me something crazy like, "Use the ladder." But at that point, we had an established system, so I warned him, "Andrew, if you don't move, I'm going to pee on you." Nothing. "Andrew, I'm serious." Still nothing. So I peed on him. He jumps up and runs into Mom and Dad's room yelling, "Dad, Courtney peed on me." And that was the day I learned Andrew was a snitch.
Well, my inn was definitely not the clubhouse. As Christy said, she was the only girl allowed. Andrew and our cousin John had decided this fort was an exclusive organization, and if we wanted access, there were terms and conditions. My cousin Pam and I literally had to sign a contract to be allowed in. The contract basically promised that we would behave and not act like little brats. We actually signed it immediately because getting included in something that Andrew created felt like getting invited into the coolest club on earth. Growing up with Andrew always felt like trying to gain access to whatever exciting thing he was building next. Andrew and our cousin John were the big brothers. They were always leading the pack, especially during Christmases at Mima and Peepaw's place. All the cousins piled together, BB guns in hand, sleeping in the back of Peepaw's semi-truck, staying up too late, and laughing until our stomachs hurt. When Andrew discovered something new and cool, he immediately shared it with us. Music, books, authors, bands, ideas. He was an avid reader. Because of him, I was reading William Shakespeare, Ernest Hemingway, Edgar Allan Poe, books like A Tale of Two Cities and Hamlet, which were some of his favorites. If Andrew said something was good, I trusted him. I read every book he told me to. I was probably 10 years old, still reading Babysitter's Club books, and suddenly Andrew was introducing me to this whole new world of literature. I still love those books to this day. Even when we were reading completely different things, I loved listening to him talk about what he was reading because he spoke with so much passion and curiosity. He genuinely wanted to understand people, history, faith, ideas, and always searching for deeper meaning. Like literature, music was a huge part of Andrew's life. As a kid, Andrew was obsessed with drums. He always had drumsticks in his hand and was constantly tapping on something. Most of the time, he carried around a drum pad and sat in the car or the living room, practicing rhythms nonstop. It's really a blessing he never got an actual drum set. But Andrew didn't really need drums in front of him. The man could air drum with Olympic-level commitment. If one of his favorite songs came on in the car, suddenly every limb was involved. He'd be drumming on the dashboard, tapping his knee, hitting every beat perfectly, and then look over at me with total excitement and say, "I love that part." Or, "That's some good stuff." "Killer" was one of his favorite words. It always cracked me up. Andrew and I sharing music with each other became a regular thing for us. I would get texts or calls like, "Hey, beautiful, there's a new Killer song. You gotta listen to it. You're gonna love it. Listen to it and tell me what you think." And then we'd spend forever talking about it, the lyrics, the meaning, the guitar solo, the percussion, because the meaning mattered to Andrew just as much as the beat did. Music was really a window into his soul, almost like his personal journal entries, which is ironic because he certainly did not journal. It was nothing for Andrew's playlist to go from Mozart to Metallica. I loved watching music light him up. It reminds me of a Shakespeare quote that says, "If music be the food of love, play on." And Andrew and I went to Bonnaroo on one occasion. We were in a sea of thousands of people, and I was trying my best to keep close tabs on him. Much easier said than done. Andrew would spot something interesting and just take off. So, of course, I'm panicking, trying to find him, and I finally spot him standing outside the silent disco tent, looking completely confused. This was 2009 when silent discos were just becoming a thing, so I ran up to him, very relieved to have found him, and he looks at me, cool as a cucumber, confused why I'm worried. He says, "What the heck is going on in there?" And I explained the whole silent disco thing to him, and he just looked at me and he said, "Strange, whatever." And honestly, that was Andrew. He was always willing to try something new, very live and let live, though he might still give it a little side eye. I'll never forget how excited he was when he surprised me with Red Hot Chili Pepper tickets for my 22nd birthday. And years later, getting to surprise him with tickets to his favorite band, Metallica, became one of my favorite memories. One of the happiest days of his life, and honestly, one of mine. You can read it.
There's a Bob Marley quote that says, "One good thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain." And that was always true for Andrew. He definitely cultivated all of our music taste. like Columbia Records. In the early 90s, Columbia Records had a deal. Pay $10 a month, pick out 10 CDs every month. We'd wait for that list to come in the mail so we could pick the next batch. And by we, I definitely mean Andrew and Christy. Luckily, they had pretty good taste. One day, Mom found an STP. Well, STP, Stone Temple Pilots. She pulled out the lyrics, gathered us all into the living room. She proceeded to read them out loud. I'll spare you the full recital, but it was unforgettable. When she finished, she looked at us and said, "Do you guys know what that means?" We had choices. Say yes and disappoint her, or say no and run the risk of her breaking it down lyric by lyric. Pretty sure that was the day our 10 CDs a month era came to an end. But Andrew pulled through yet again and figured out how to burn CDs, which was revolutionary because there were suddenly no album covers laying around for Mom to inspect. As far as she knew, we were just listening to Jesus Loves Me.
As we've already shared, Andrew was up for adventures. That definitely carried over into our four-wheeling days. And there was sort of this period of time with four-wheelers, which was a big part of our lives, where Andrew didn't have seizures yet. Then we kind of had a period of denial about his seizures. So there was a period he was actually able to drive the four-wheelers, and that, of course, didn't last throughout his life. But he loved to go out on the four-wheeler. So one of the last times that Andrew drove, it was just he and I, and we were riding down a ravine, and he had a seizure. Now, his seizures didn't always, it wasn't convulsions. He could just have a seizure and be out. And I realized, as soon as I realized the four-wheeler was just going straight into a tree down this ravine, that something wasn't right. And so I just grabbed the handlebars trying to stop us. After the four-wheeler came to a stop, we just sat there quietly until we could talk again. Meanwhile, I could feel that my tooth was gone, and it was a permanent tooth. So I had lost a tooth, and I'm thinking, oh man, Andrew, I don't want him to know. He's going to feel so bad. Of course, as he came to, being Andrew, the first thing he asked was if I was okay. And I just said, yeah, I'm fine. I just really didn't want him to know. So as I talked, he said, wait, smile, love. And so I smiled. And he said, oh no, your tooth is gone. I said, it's fine. And we just started laughing. So anyway, that was Andrew adventures, and he wasn't even rattled by running down the ravine. After he came to, my tooth is missing, he drove us home. It was fine.
As has already been stated, Andrew was also a thrill seeker. He had one life to live, and he was going to live it to the fullest. He is the sole reason Mom and Dad took us to Busch Gardens on one of our Florida vacations. Andrew had done all the research, read all the hype about the newest roller coaster that was supposed to be the fastest and wildest ride anywhere. We also spent countless hours at Silver Dollar City growing up. Some of our favorite memories with our siblings happened there, running all over the park together, trying to ride every single ride before the day was over. And thanks to Andrew's meticulous planning, we usually succeeded. Even as adults, that love for thrill rides never faded. He was always ready to ride roller coasters with his nephews at Silver Dollar City or Dollywood, even if those were a little tame for Andrew's standards.
That was true whether it was theme parks or horseback riding into a power plant. Andrew would execute any plan. On occasion, Andrew would saddle up the horses, and we would ride to Swepco. Right up to the gates, he would press the button. A person would come on the speaker, and they'd say, "How can we help you?" Andrew said, "We'd like a tour." And lo and behold, it worked. They buzzed the gate, it opened, we rode the horses in, tied it up at the smokestack. Worker came out and asked us, "Where would you like to go?" Without Andrew, I don't think any of us would have had the confidence to do half the ridiculous things we did. But Andrew was just fearless and a thrill seeker. He was also one of the deepest thinkers I've ever known. Andrew was perfectly content inside reading a dictionary, a thesaurus, a Bible, or Bible concordance. Real riveting stuff. Christy mentioned they were students of Mario Bros. The truth is, Andrew was a student of everything. One of those things was chess.
Yeah.
It's going to go good. Yeah. Somewhere between 4th and 6th grade. Here we go. He checked out a book from the school library, that taught him how to play chess. That book led to another, and then another, each one more advanced. He'd play anyone willing to sit across from him, but especially loved teaching. The first few years, I don't think we actually finished a game. Anyone who knew Andrew knows he was incredibly methodical. He never rushed a decision. Every move was carefully thought out. Not just his move, but how you were most likely going to respond. This could take several minutes, and usually left me ready to go find something more fun. As I got older, my desire to beat him grew stronger. There were times I thought I had him cornered, completely convinced I was about to win. Then he'd make one move and unravel everything I planned, leaving me completely stuck instead. Playing chess against Andrew showed his brilliance. It was really a glimpse into how he lived his life. Never rash, always thoughtful, always 2 steps ahead. One of the last games we played, after dozens and dozens of tries, I finally beat him. And I'll be honest, it didn't feel that great.
Some of my favorite memories of Andrew aren't the big adventures or stories at all. They're the small, everyday moments that carried warmth, affection, humor, and familiarity all at once. If one of us was in the kitchen cooking, there was a good chance Andrew would wander in, bop us lightly on the head, or catch the back of our knee with his foot just enough to make us stumble for a second. And then he'd grin and say, "Hey, sister," or, "Hola, beautiful." This is how he greeted me so many times throughout my life.
Whenever Andrew and Christy came home from college, the world was right again. Even after Dad added on to the house, we all finally had our own rooms. When Andrew came home, I'd still go sleep in his room. One night I asked him about computer science job at college, and he started explaining coding to me while we were laying there talking. I fell asleep immediately. The next night I asked him to explain it again. Same thing, fell asleep. Third night I asked him, and he just started laughing and said, "Forget you, dude. You're just using me to fall asleep." Not long after Andrew moved back home from college, I had picked him up and we were headed to town when he looked over at me and said, "Man, you realize I've never driven before?" And honestly, that hit me. So I told him, "We can change that right now." He was hesitant, and I said, "Look, we've got a bench seat. I'll go around. I can sit in the middle. I can grab the wheel. If you have a seizure, I can grab the wheel," and I put my foot on the brake. He still wasn't sure. So finally, I pulled over on the side of the road, got out, walked around to the passenger side, and told him, "The only way this truck is moving is if you're driving it." So he did, for about 2 miles. Slow, careful, very cautious.
Christmas Eve is one of my favorites. When Andrew and Christy went off to college, it was brutal on us to be left behind. So as Courtney mentioned, it was good when they were all back home. All 4 of us would sit in the living room with the lights off, except for the glow of the Christmas tree, and way too excited to sleep. Andrew was the worst at keeping secrets. One year, laying by the tree, Andrew's on one couch, Christy and I are on one, Courtney's in the recliner. Andrew turns to me and Christy and he says, he turns to Courtney, actually, he just says to the whole room, he says, "Hey, Courtney, are you awake?" Courtney says, "Yeah." And Andrew goes, "Man, I was so hoping to show y'all the skateboard I got Courtney." We started screaming, "Andrew!" And he goes, "Oh, crap." I laughed so hard. He genuinely got more excited about giving gifts than receiving them.
And that's the thing we keep coming back to. All of us had our own relationship with Andrew, but we also had this relationship together, the 4 of us. The siblings have a tradition on the first of every month. We try to be the first person to claim a little luck by saying rabbit, rabbit. And if you didn't get it in first, you just accepted your month might not go your way. But honestly, it never really felt like a victory when we beat Andrew. Because we all quietly knew he deserved the luck. Then on March 1, 2026, at 1:30 in the morning, because he knew we were sleeping, he rabbits us. And in a way only he could. Andrew created his own luck. So now all the future months belong to him. This was the first time Andrew got to be the lucky one. We will miss him forever, but Andrew poured a lifetime into us, and because of that, we are the lucky ones.
Hey everybody, I'm Weston Young, and up here with me is the cousin crew. Andrew's nieces and nephews who got the privilege of calling him Uncle Andy. We have Hayden, Ellie and Emmy, Ace, Jude, Kingston, and Theo. While only a few of us are actually going to take the mic today, the stories we share represent all of us. Every single person standing up here has their own incredibly special, cherished memories of the time we got to spend with him. If you ask any of us up here, almost all of us share a connection to Uncle Andy through chess. For some, it was the day he gave us our first chessboard. For others, it was the hours he spent playing with us. But for me, I will always remember how patiently he taught me. I remember being at Grammy and Papa's, and I asked him if he would teach me. And being the sweet uncle he was, he just smiled and he said, yeah. Excited to learn, I sat down and we began to play. And as he showed me the moves, I would try to copy him, but I would always do it at the wrong times. I just wanted to be like my Uncle Andy and show him that I was paying attention to the strategy he was teaching me, but I didn't really know what I was doing. Yeah, anytime I made the wrong move, though, and it didn't make sense, instead of getting frustrated or making me feel bad, he would just gently correct me. With a smile on his face, he would shake his head and he'd say, that's not exactly how you'd want to do that, nephew. He was the best teacher anyone could ask for. And one day, I hope to be half the teacher to my nephews that my Uncle Andy was to me.
I'm Ace Wilder. Like Weston said, I'll always remember Uncle Andy for how kind and selfless he was. He was willing to do anything for his family and the people he loved. My cousin Kingston and I remember him at every one of our baseball and basketball games. I will always remember the last baseball game he was at of mine. It was a doubleheader and it was freezing cold. I didn't even play much in that first game, but he stood out there with the whole time with a smile on his face, just waiting for me to get in. That was just the man Uncle Andy was for his family, always there and always proud. I remember going to Kingston's basketball games and seeing how proud Uncle Andy got whenever Kingston made a shot or stole the ball. I know for Kingston and me, those games will never be the same without Uncle Andy there cheering us on. Even though he was usually cheering from the sidelines and wasn't really much of an athlete himself, there was one time I remember him actually getting in the game. One summer we were hanging out by the pool, playing pool basketball, and I wanted to play a game of horse. I asked Uncle Andy if he wanted to play, And being the nice guy he is, of course he said yes. A bunch of us were playing, but when it got to his turn, I remember it so well. He only shot one-handed. I was like, what? And what was even crazier is that he actually made his shots. For someone who was legally blind, he had a pretty great shot. Along with sports, another thing I will always cherish is our shared interest in cooking. I will never forget how Uncle Andy made his grilled cheese. He would always put fresh jalapenos on them. Now I don't eat my grilled cheese any other way. So whenever I make one, I will think of him. I also think about the last meal I made for him. It was a smash burger out of a new cookbook I had gotten. Of course he liked it, but he was probably too nice to tell me if it was actually bad or not. Whenever I cook, I will always think of Uncle Andy and the impact he left on me.
I'm Theodore McWhite. One of the best memories I have with my Uncle Andy is the time we were making cookies at his house. He had such a big sweet tooth, and he was really good at making cookies. We made enough to share it with everyone, even though he and I might have snuck a couple extras for ourselves. And I just love cooking up with him because it was so fun. I also remember him coming to my basketball games to cheer me on. At the end of the game, he would come straight over just to tell me how well I played. That always made me feel really good, and I'll never forget it.
I'm Jude Wilder. My Uncle Andy was such a great man, and I have so many memories I will carry with me throughout my life to remember his greatness. More than anything, he was just so proud to be our uncle. He was incredibly affectionate and never missed an opportunity to tell us how much he loved us. Like Weston already mentioned, he was a great teacher, not only in chess, but in life. He gave me my first chessboard when I was 4 years old, and he was always so patient with everyone, no matter what. Those memories of playing chess with him will stay with me forever. Another thing I deeply admire about my Uncle Andy was his financial wisdom and how he invested in the stock market. Following his example, this Christmas, instead of asking for presents, I chose to invest my money in the stock market. It is something I will have forever to remind me of his wisdom. He also shared that wisdom through his love for reading. It was so much fun when my reading interest finally caught up with his. I had started reading Harry Potter, a series he had read many years prior. To bring him into the experience with me, we invited him over for a Harry Potter movie night every time I finished reading one of the books. I will always be grateful for those nights and for everything he taught us.
I'm Emmy. I just want to say that I will always remember how gentle, kind, and loving my Uncle Andy was to my sister Ellie and me. He was that way to all of us. We love him and we will all miss him so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. If we haven't met before, my name is Tron Wilder. I'm Christy's husband and Andrew's brother-in-law. I want to add my thank yous to all of you for being here today to support and surround our family. I've pretty much been a part of this family since Christy brought me home to Gentry to meet everybody in the spring of 1999. But interestingly enough, Andrew was the first member of the Young family that I ever crossed paths with. We started college the same year, in 1997, at Southern Adventist University. And as fate would have it, Andrew and I lived on the same hallway in the same dormitory. And so I would cross paths with him every now and then. We didn't really interact a whole lot because Andrew, even though we didn't interact, he did stand out to me. We would walk across each other as we were going into our rooms in the dorm. But Andrew, he stood out for two reasons. One, he always just dressed really well and looked like he was put together. His hair was combed perfectly, and I was like, man, this guy's really got it together. And he was also he was just walking with purpose and with force, and he would never look up and say much to anybody. And he was just speed walking. And it wasn't until a year later when I met Christy and then actually officially met Andrew for the first time that I realized that he wasn't antisocial. He wasn't really all that intense. He was just legally blind, and he was watching as he went, to make sure he didn't trip or something. But that first impression that I had of Andrew, of somebody who was driven, sharp, put together, motivated, moving forward with an undeniable purpose, that wasn't actually all that wrong. It actually captured who Andrew was at his core. And that's what I want to share with you today. I want to talk about how, Andrew's story told who he was at his core. Andrew Cliffton Young was born December 16th, 1977, the firstborn son of Steve and Donna, a beautiful boy with bright blonde hair, and he made them parents for the very first time. And though he was born with a visual impairment that made him legally blind, he was perfect to his parents. And his disability didn't hold him back in those early years. He had a fierce, strong, and magnetic personality. He was gifted with a brilliant intellect and a deep curiosity of the world, and you've heard so many stories about that already. And he took that natural leadership into his childhood, teaching and leading his sister Christy, who was only 15 months younger than him, and helping shape her into the strong, passionate person she is today. And when Brooke and Courtney came along half a decade later, even though they were the new, sometimes annoying little siblings, Andrew didn't push them aside. Instead, he folded them right into all of his plans and his childhood schemes, and he became their ultimate role model, the big brother that everybody naturally looked up to. He was a young boy who took charge of the time that he spent with his friends and his family. But when Andrew was in the 4th grade, the storm broke. On what started as a completely ordinary morning, while Andrew and Christy were getting ready for school and their mom, Donna, was making breakfast, Andrew walked into the kitchen, and he suddenly couldn't speak. No one knew what was happening. Donna called Steve hysterical. The terrifying thought was hanging in the air that Andrew might not ever speak another word. But in that chaotic kitchen, Andrew didn't panic. He had to be scared, I'm sure. But he stayed calm, and he looked at his mother, and he was trying to mouth the words, "I love you." Andrew had his first seizure. And like any family, they had hoped and prayed that it was a one-time anomaly. But the seizures returned again and again, soon morphing into harsher grand mal seizures and drawing an invisible dividing line through Andrew's childhood. There was the before, when Andrew was the confident big brother charting his youth along with that of his siblings. And then there was the after. The unpredictable violence of seizures began to disrupt every single aspect of Andrew's daily life. And the family embarked on a desperate search to find a way to mitigate those seizures. And that search took them to brain surgeons, neurologists, epileptologists. It involved several surgeries, medications, device implants. It took them to specialists from Oklahoma City to Birmingham to Vanderbilt Hospital, all across the country. It was a search that provided many fleeting moments of hope for Andrew, but never a cure. Instead of finding relief, Andrew's seizures only got worse, and they morphed again over time, and he began to experience almost every single type of seizure that the human body can endure: grand mal, petit mal, focal seizures, terrifying drop seizures. And that began to steal his life. That boy with a magnetic personality soon found himself isolated. The seizures made him an outcast amongst his peers. And close friends that he had didn't any longer know how to stand beside him. And he watched as those friends went on to have relationships, go off to college, start careers, get married, have families. But watching from the sidelines wasn't for Andrew, and he was not about to surrender to this reality. As a young man who still had his life ahead of him and still carried that strong childhood drive, that desire to learn and engage with the world, he was determined not to let his physical limitations stop him from achieving the life that he knew he was destined for. So he entered college to study the things that he was passionate about: math and computer science. And Andrew spent 10 years slogging through those classes, striving to obtain his degree. He got a job early in his college days as a programmer in the university's IT department, and his code was perfect. But his seizures and his low vision made the work too slow to sustain a career in that field. So, unwilling to quit and give up, he pivoted to his other love, mathematics. And inspired by his own patient mentors that he had in the math department at Southern, he set out to become a math teacher so he could offer that same care to others that he had received. And he tackled grueling courses like abstract algebra and differential equations. He failed some of those classes. He withdrew from some. He retook them. He simply refused to let his limitations rewrite his dream. Andrew knew that he had the intellectual ability to do this, and he certainly had the motivation. But the fact was that he had a debilitating disability that just kept getting in his way. Every single day, he went to class and he worked harder than anybody else in that room. But eventually, the seizures and the constant brain injuries that occurred from falling and the impact that all of that had on his short-term memory, that just became an insurmountable wall. And Andrew had to make the tough decision to leave college. Most people in his situation would have applied directly for disability benefits right then and there, but that was not Andrew. His family had instilled in him a strong work ethic and a desire to be self-sufficient. He had spent many years working in the family businesses, putting in hours at the construction site and working at the family's hardware store, State Line Supply. So when college was no longer an option, he went straight into the workforce. But for Andrew, entering the job market wasn't as easy as just simply filling out a job application. Stepping into the working world with these unpredictable, severe seizures brought an entirely new set of barriers. His condition made finding safe, accommodating work difficult, and because many places simply wouldn't take the risk, doors were closed on Andrew before he could even step through them. But his work ethic wouldn't let him quit, and he kept pushing along with the help of good friends until he secured work where he could, sorting donated wares for Goodwill and sweeping floors at Walmart. And even then, the struggle didn't end with just getting hired. Just getting to work every day was a monumental task for Andrew. Unable to drive, he had to wake up early, get himself ready, walk sometimes miles to the bus stop, and take multiple bus routes just to clock in. To go from studying differential equations to sweeping floors would make a lot of people bitter. But even though his mind was wired for complex algorithms, Andrew never believed that he was too smart for an honest day's work. He took genuine pride in what he did. For a man whose experiences had so often forced him into isolations, the jobs he had gave him something beautiful, and he found community and connection alongside his coworkers. Yet tragically, even at places like Goodwill and Walmart, he was always seen as a liability by his employers. He would have a seizure, fall, hit his head in the job, a worried customer would find him and call an ambulance, and the medical bills started to pile up, far outpacing his paychecks. And though his supervisors liked him, the corporate worry over the liability of having Andrew on the job site always won out. They would look for any trivial reason to let him go, and sooner or later, Andrew would find himself unemployed yet again. But not before he managed to do something pretty incredible. On his own, on that kind of pay at Walmart and Goodwill, Andrew saved enough money to purchase his own home, a duplex, where he lived on one side and rented out the other. And then, following in the footsteps of his grandfather and as an homage to his years growing up in Northwest Arkansas, he invested in Walmart stocks. And soon, Andrew had built up more in his investment accounts than most able-bodied people ever dreamed of having. Andrew took the absolute minimum that this world was willing to give him, and he built a foundation out of it. He refused to be denied by his limitations, and his drive to create a meaningful life and a future for himself never wavered. Andrew had every reason to be bitter. Watching the healthy lives of those around him was hard and depressing, and he questioned why his life, which started with so much promise, wouldn't allow him to fulfill it. Sometimes in late-night conversations with Christy and Brooke and Courtney, the sheer unfairness of it all would spill over into tears. And he felt guilty for bringing that up, afraid he was being a burden. But for his siblings, it was an absolute gift to share a little of that burden for Andrew and to be able to care for the big brother who had always cared for them. Because even in the midst of that private heartbreak, Andrew refused to let his pain overshadow his love for his family. He lived a life of constant disappointment and insurmountable barriers. Yet he remained fiercely proud of his siblings, his nieces, his nephews, and celebrating every success and never once making about himself. But no matter how deeply he loved his family, a human body can only fight for so long. There's a limit to what one person can physically endure decade after decade. And as he moved into that final chapter of his life, Andrew's seizures had become utterly relentless. He couldn't even walk outside his own yard without the fear of falling and having a stranger call an ambulance and a trip to the ER that he couldn't afford. The cruelty of his condition had reached a point where even running water was a trigger for a seizure for Andrew. Just trying to take a shower, drink a glass of water, often led to him falling and hitting his head. Andrew had placed his hope in so many treatments, only to endure the heartbreak of watching every one of them fall short. Decades of fighting, hoping, and trying had left him exhausted. Slowly, epilepsy had rewritten the rules of his life, taking away his independence, piece by piece. After battling for so hard, for so long, he had to face the devastating reality that the doctors had no more answers for him. Faced with a future where his physical pain and disappointment would only get worse, Andrew made the unimaginably difficult decision to reclaim his peace. When the medical world had nothing left to offer him, he found his own way to step out of the suffering. It was a choice born of pure exhaustion, but in the end, finding his rest was the final thing he had the power to choose. And now we, his family, his friends, his loved ones, we're left here and we're sad. But our sadness is for our loss. And yes, not having Andrew around anymore is a loss to everyone who loved him and was loved by him. But if we're completely honest with ourselves, wishing him back into this untenable reality just for our comfort and our happiness, that's what would be selfish. Andrew's decision was about finding peace, finding relief in the only way that he could. It was not an act of selfishness. Because Andrew was and always will be remembered as one of the most selfless, humble, and utterly kind individuals that any of us ever will have the privilege of knowing. It's exactly because he was so kind and selfless and good that the reality of his suffering is hard to accept. It brings us face to face with a question that I know many of us are wrestling with today. Why do good people suffer? Why did a man with such a brilliant mind and such a gentle heart have to suffer such a relentlessly hard life? We're left behind to try to figure out what we are supposed to take away from so much pain and unfairness. When I think about Andrew's life, I can't help but think of the story of Job. If you're familiar with the book of Job, you know that it begins with a man who, much like Andrew, is exceptionally good, an upright man who suddenly faces catastrophic, unimaginable suffering. He loses his health, his livelihood, his peace. And most of the 42 chapters in the book of Job recount Job and his friends just sitting in the ashes trying to figure out why all this happened. Job's friends do what human beings almost always do when we're terrified by tragedy. Our minds desperately try to find a reason. We don't do well with the unknown. We crave explanations because we want the world to feel predictable and orderly. It helps us feel safe and comfortable. So Job's friends offer him a multitude of theories. They tell him, you must be hiding a secret sin, or you're being punished by God, or he's using this pain to discipline you and teach you a lesson. They try to fit Job's suffering into a neat, understandable box. But the core message of the book of Job is that every single one of those explanations was wrong. Job did nothing to deserve his suffering, and neither did Andrew. We do this too sometimes. In the face of this immense loss, I know the family has heard many well-meaning phrases that were meant to bring comfort. God has a plan. Everything happens for a reason, or it's all in God's timing. We have a tendency to offer these shallow phrases because wrapping a tragedy up in a neat little bow makes us feel safe. It's a human reflex to try to explain away the pain just to make ourselves feel comfortable, and so we don't have to sit with the heavy, unresolved realities of grief. But when we use those phrases to explain away suffering, we forget how heavy those phrases are to carry, and Andrew had to carry them his whole life. Oftentimes, when his body betrayed him, someone was there to suggest that it was a part of a divine blueprint to help shape his character. And he had to listen to people try to justify the unfairness of his life. And we refuse to make that same mistake today by justifying the unfairness of his death. And yet, even knowing all that, it's natural to sit here today and wonder why. Why did a young man with such a brilliant mind, a man who worked harder than anyone else in the room, a man with such a selfless heart, why did he have to face a life of constant physical barriers? Why did his body betray him so many times? And the profound truth of the book of Job is that searching for a reason is futile. We might not ever get the answer to that why. For almost the entire story, as Job begs for an explanation, God is silent. And when the answer finally does come, it's not a neat and tidy explanation designed to give comfort. God speaks to Job from inside a roaring, powerful storm, showing that the divine understanding cannot be forced into safe, predictable limits of human reasoning. And even then, God never actually gives an answer to the question of why. Instead of giving a reason, God takes Job on a tour of the cosmos, and he shows him the stars and the weather and the untamed, terrifying wild beasts that exist in this world. The point of that incredible tour was not to put Job in his place, but to show him that the world is just too complex for our understanding. It's beautiful, yes, but it's also broken, unpredictable, dangerous, and wild. The universe is vast, and God's wisdom in understanding it is infinitely better than our finite explanations. And I believe that same truth applies to the narratives that we sometimes construct about how a life ends in the way that Andrew's did. When someone's suffering reaches a point where they have to find their own relief, we're often quick to apply another set of religious rules. We try to neatly categorize what that means spiritually. But just like Job's friends, when we try to fit the depths of human despair and God's boundless grace into rigid human categories, we are wrong. God's understanding of Andrew's exhausted mind and body is infinitely larger and infinitely more compassionate than any human explanation. Andrew's circumstances were a heartbreaking example of that brokenness. His seizures were not a punishment. They were not some part of a divine plan. They were just simply the result of a physical world that is chaotic and profoundly unfair. For decades, Andrew bore the brunt of that chaos in his own body every day. But just because there's not a simple answer for the reason why he suffered does not mean there are no lessons for us to take away from Andrew's story. In fact, there are two great takeaways from the book of Job that I believe apply perfectly to Andrew's life and for us today. The first is this: we are allowed to lament. Throughout the story, Job brings his raw, unfiltered anger, grief, and confusion directly to God. He cries out that it's not fair, and God doesn't condemn him for his honesty. He listens because God can't handle our pain. He gets the agonizing reality of suffering vastly more than we think he does. God was able to hold Andrew's anger and his difficult questions throughout his life in the exact same way that he held Job's. And he's more than able to handle our anger, our questioning, and our lament today. We don't have to pretend that Andrew's passing is anything less than agonizing. We're allowed to be sad and heartbroken, and we can bring our tears and our anger forward without fear, honoring the immense weight of what Andrew carried. But the second takeaway is found in how Andrew chose to live his life with all of that unfairness. When you're knocked down every single day by a harsh, broken body, the natural human response is to turn inward and to become entirely consumed by your own pain. And no one would have blamed Andrew if he had become bitter, but he never did. Instead, he lived up to the very meaning of his name. As Christy mentioned earlier, Kaylee, a dear friend, recently shared a beautiful realization with her. The name Andrew stems from a Greek word meaning courage. She reminded us that courage is not the absence of fear or difficulty. It's the mental and moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger. It's the ability to act in spite of fear. Andrew was the absolute personification of courage. He defied what this world and what his body threw at him every single day of his life. He endured the chaos of his physical body, but he protected the beauty of his soul. And he did that by living with an astonishing grace. He did not let the turbulence of his circumstances destroy the capacity that he had for love. And he celebrated his family. He rejoiced in the accomplishments of his nieces and nephews. He found pride in sweeping floors and organizing shelves. He bought a house. He built a life. He remained fiercely kind. We may never understand why Andrew had to suffer the way he did, but we know how to live the way he lived in the midst of it. As we leave here today, giving ourselves permission to grieve the unfairness of it all is necessary. But the greatest tribute that we can pay to Andrew is to learn from him. We keep his spirit alive when we choose humility, hard work, patience, kindness, and unconditional love. Going forward, whenever we face the terrifying, uncertain journeys in our own lives, Andrew's courage can be our guide, reminding us to act in spite of our fear, even when life feels overwhelmingly hard. Andrew's body experienced the brokenness of this world, but his spirit showed us the absolute best of it. And for that, we will remember him, and we will love him forever.
The timeless theme, earth and heaven will pass away. It's not a dream, God will make all things new that day. Gone is the curse from which I stumbled and fell. Evil is banished to eternal hell. No more night, no more pain, no more tears, never crying again. And praises to See all around, now the nations bow down to sing. The only sound is the praises to Christ our King. Slowly the names from the book are read. I know the King, so there's no need to dread. No more night, no more pain, no more tears, never crying again. And praises to the great I am. We will live in the light of the risen Lamb. See over there, there's a mansion prepared for me, where I will dwell with my Savior eternally. No more night, no more pain, no more tears, never crying again. And praises to the great I am. We will live in the light of the risen Lamb. We will live in the light of the risen Lamb.
Good afternoon. I am the cousin of Steve, Christy, Andrew, Brooke, and Courtney, and I'm reading this upon behalf of Donna, Andrew's mom. When I sat down to write this tribute, one of my first thoughts was wondering how I could possibly do this without Andrew correcting my grammar. But here it goes. Andrew was my precious firstborn. Steve and I were so excited to welcome our baby boy into the world, 6.5 pounds of pure joy. He was such a happy baby, and we were such proud parents. From the very beginning, Andrew brought happiness into our lives, and he continued making us proud every single day. He was the first to make me a mother. Raising him was one of the greatest honors and most beautiful chapters of my life. Now let's talk about how he felt when his first sibling came along. When Steve and his mom came to pick me up from the hospital after I had Christy, Andrew would not even look at me or come near me until Steve handed the baby to his mom. Only then did Andrew come to sit on my lap. While I was in the hospital for those 3 days, back in the days where you could stay in the hospital, he became very sick because he had never been away from his mama that long before. Then suddenly, I came home with a new baby. Raising Andrew was the most beautiful chapter in my life. He taught us how to be parents, and our hearts have never been the same since. He was such a blessing. I don't always have the right words, but my heart never stopped loving him. He was very sweet to his siblings. He called his older sister Love and his younger sister Beautiful. And in his younger years, he would call his little brother a wussy. And Courtney thought that that was such a good thing until he got older and realized that it really wasn't a term of endearment. The way he showed love to his nieces and nephews was fun to witness, and they would end up loving him just as much as he loved them. Most people don't know this, but before Christy was born, I had already taught Andrew how to rock his baby, so that when I brought the real baby home, he would sit together in our rocking chair side by side, and we would rock our babies together. Well, the moment came, and when we brought the real baby Christy home, we sat down exactly to do what we had been practicing. The next thing I saw was the baby doll flying clear across the room. That pretty much summed up how he felt about his real-life baby sister, and he was definitely not shy about expressing his feelings. He once tried to throw her out of her bassinet, and during one family photo, he smiled sweetly for the camera, but really he was, while Christy was crying hysterically, but we realized that he was pinching her behind our backs the entire time. Even though it was not exactly love at first sight, it did not take long before they became best buddies. Andrew grew into the best big brother his siblings could ever ask for. He loved all three of them deeply, and that bond only grew stronger with time. He was an incredible brother, uncle, grandson, cousin, nephew, and friend. As a child, Andrew was incredibly curious and intelligent. Even at 5 or 6 years old, he would stand beside me in the kitchen while I cooked and ask question after question about life and how things worked. I cannot remember the exact questions now, but they were the kind of questions that make you stop and think. Questions like, how do matches catch fire? Why do apples turn brown? How big is the universe? He was always thinking deeply. If only I had owned the book 1,000 Whys back then. So I have now found a book called 100 Whys to present to my grandchildren today. I would like to share some of Andrew's fondest memories. His elementary school years were some of his happiest. He had many friends and he loved school. He loved teaching with Jeremy and Mrs. Kruger's class. His teachers appreciated that he never used his disabilities as excuses for not doing something. Andrew worked hard at everything he did. He was diligent and took pride in doing things the right way. If he could not do something well, he would rather not do it at all. Life began changing for Andrew when he was 12 years old. One morning while getting ready for school, he went to get lunch money and came back unable to speak. He started mouthing the words, "I love you, Mom," because he truly thought he might not be ever able to talk again. By the time I got off the phone with his dad, his speech had returned, but we were terrified. We did not know what was happening. Not long after that, he had his first grand mal seizure while playing Mario. Watching that seizure changed everything for our family. Suddenly, we were going from doctor to doctor, trying to find answers for our son. What many people may not realize is that Andrew not only battled epilepsy, but he was also legally blind. It was truly a double whammy. Beginning high school became an even greater challenge for him. Homework became harder, seizures became more severe, and we were still searching for a neurologist who could truly help him. Finally, Carla, that's me, recommended a seizure specialist in Oklahoma City. She took great interest in Andrew and did all she knew to do, but still, there was no cure. Andrew also loved life and loved being active. He enjoyed rollerblading, water skiing, riding four-wheelers in Colorado with his family, and spending time outdoors. He loved working out on his Nordic track and was excited to get his first gateway computer when he was still in elementary school. He always enjoyed learning new things and keeping busy. One of the things Andrew looked forward to every year was the Oklahoma camp meeting. He had many friends there, and somehow all the kids would eventually gather around our tent. Those summers brought him so much happiness. One year we had an exchange student from Austria who became very special to our family, and Andrew truly enjoyed spending time with her. She later flew back to attend the Oklahoma camp meeting with us, and another year joined us on our family trip to Disney World in Florida. These are memories that we will treasure forever. By the way, have you ever met anyone who folded their dirty laundry? Well, that was Andrew, but he never judged anyone else for not following his example. A good characteristic of Andrew was that he listened when people talked and made them feel important. Something about Andrew is that if he says he's going to do something, he always follows through with it. His yes was a yes, and his no was a no. He was persevering, loving, kind, thoughtful, and smart. Despite his pain, his day-to-day struggles, falling, hospital visits, and not being able to do all the things that we can do, he never complained and he never drew attention to himself. Andrew's laughs, his smile, his wisdom, and most of all, his being here. His high school years were also memorable, but they also became more challenging as his seizures worsened. After graduating from high school, I would drive him to Northwest Arkansas Community College. Since I had to be there anyway, I decided to take a class 2. I wouldn't trade anything for those times together. Later, after Andrew moved to Chattanooga, when we would go visit him, I would sometimes pick him up from work at Walmart, and I got to meet some of his coworkers. Some would ask him, "Is that your mom?" They were quick to tell me, "We love your son." We got a card in the mail from his coworkers, and all of them had signed it. One mentioned how he loved broccoli and chocolate-covered cherries. They mentioned that he was the life of the party. He could be humorous and he could be serious. Another one said that there was never a dull moment at work with Andrew. When they heard a broom drop, they would all stop what they were doing and run to Andrew because they knew it was him having a seizure. His manager put a bench for him to sit on until he started to feel better after his seizures. One day, someone had moved the bench, and when the manager found out, he was upset and told everyone that the bench was not to be moved, that it was Andrew's bench, and that sure made his mama's heart happy that he had such good coworkers. Another great memory of his life was going to Alaska with his family. He absolutely loved it there. While he was there, he bought a beautiful map of Alaska, and you will see this map displayed in the lobby. That map represents more than a place he visited. It represents joy, adventure, family memories, and a part of life that truly made Andrew happy. I would go on and on with the memories, but I will save those for myself. Andrew and I had many conversations during the week leading up to his last day. We even talked a few hours before the phone call that Courtney received that night. I will forever cherish every one of those conversations. I wish I had hugged him tighter and longer. I wish I had known our last goodbyes would be the last. But I am thankful our last words he heard from me were, "I love you." I will cherish every phone call we had, especially the week leading up to his last day. I will miss the kiss on my forehead. I will miss the words, "I love you," his sincere compliments telling me that I'm beautiful. He was always quick to say, "You and Dad were the best parents. I know you loved me, and I appreciate everything you and Dad have done for me." He always showed us gratitude, but he would never ask us for anything because he wanted to be independent. If Andrew were here today, he would say, "Oh, Mama, this is all nonsense." If I could talk to Andrew, I would say, "It hurts really bad." He will always be missed, but we will press on. I wish I had hugged him tighter and longer, and I wish our last goodbye would have not been the last. Andrew was my endless pride. I am so thankful God chose me to be his mother. It has been almost 2 months since we got the phone call that Andrew was gone, and honestly, I still cannot believe it. Part of me truly thought he would always be here. But once again, time reminded me how fragile life really is. If there was one thing I would want everyone here to take away from Andrew's life, it is this: love the people God has given you. They are gifts. Laugh together, make memories, treasure the ordinary moments, hold people a little longer, say I love you more often, and because none of us is promised forever, and Andrew is proof of that. We didn't have a way of knowing how long we would have Andrew. We always felt that his life would be shortened. I loved him with every breath I had. We didn't realize how tired and overwhelmed he was. We all loved him as if it were the last. We only get one chance to get it right. And if you ask me how I did as a mother, I will say that I did my best because he deserved the best. I'm glad that he didn't let any of my new parent mistakes determine who he would become. Every day I kept thinking about the things that I could have done differently, though. All the words I wish I had said when I still had the chance. I miss him more every day, and the way he made everything feel right. How am I doing? I'm not okay. I'm just trying to get through each day, but it is harder than I ever imagined. Some days it feels impossible. I didn't know our last goodbyes would be the last. We are hard-pressed on every side, but we are not crushed. 2 Corinthians 4:8. But if we are feeling crushed, we need to remember that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalms 34:18. Andrew is at peace, resting until Jesus comes. We will learn to live each day without Andrew, even though it will be difficult. The moment his heart stopped, mine changed forever. Healing can come from laughing, crying, and talking through it. We need spiritual and emotional healing. God is patient as we fall apart. He has promised to never leave us or forsake us during these times. And even knowing the heartbreak I would face one day, I would still choose every single time. I would do it all over again. I would love him, hold him, fight for him, worry about him, and try my best all over for him again. He taught us more than I would ever teach him, and if I had the chance to live this life all over again, I would still choose being Andrew's mom every single time. Our family circle is now broken, and our hearts are too, but we will hold tightly to the memories, the laughter, the conversations, and the love Andrew gave us so freely. Until then, Andrew will always be loved, always be missed, and always be a part of us. Love, Mom.
Well, I made a mistake today. I agreed to go last. You know, I've got a gifted wife that's a writer, gifted children, grandchildren. Tron, done a great job. Shaughnessy. You know, they have embodied and told the story of Andrew. Guess I'm supposed to point it that way. We couldn't wait for him to get here. I was extremely excited. We had a lot of snow that winter. I don't know. It seemed like it was really cold. You know, you always hear the old guys go, yeah, we walked uphill both ways in the snow. It was cold that year. We lived 2 houses up from the church. One reason Andrew was so upset about his sister coming along, the house had open heaters. It was cold at night, and Donna would get the baby into bed and feed the baby with us, and he liked it, and we liked it, and he stayed. And a year and a half later, he had to move over in the big boy bed, and that didn't go over. This picture here I just put in because I wanted to. That's, of course, Andrew there. He's less than 2 weeks old. But that's a 5-generation picture, but it's full sets. My mom and dad, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, both of them, kind of rare. We didn't know Andrew was blind. We didn't realize it till Christy started talking. She'd point out airplanes or cows or horses, and Andrew'd be going, where? And we knew he had some problems, but we didn't realize. But even with a disability, he had a curious mind. You know, here he was. He's going to get in there and help and put it together. And, you know, we did some science projects together that we'd probably get thrown out of the schoolhouse today, but Donna bought the World Encyclopedias. Andrew devoured those books. He read them constantly, and he'd come up with this idea he'd read about if you had minerals in the water that electricity would transfer through the mineral. So we took 2 lights and put them on a board, and we had plain water in one jar and salt water, and we kept putting enough salt till it worked, and you'd plug it up to the wall, and the electric could go through the salt and light the light. Of course, it wouldn't on the other one. And we actually took it to the schoolhouse and put it up, and Andrew, did the plaque or the cardboard and wrote all about it. But he just was always interested in how things worked. I was already plumbing by this time, and one of the job sites had a lot of sand left, and I asked him if I could have it. So I worked all morning hauling the sand in, built a frame, put it in there, and I was really proud of myself. Donna carried Andrew and Christy out there. We put him over in it, and the picture I thought we had. Oh, there it is, the one on the right. He's standing there. Now it doesn't do it justice, but he's actually shaking his hands, making the noise like his mother would make if he was sticking his hands in a dirty diaper or something. And he was not happy with that sand on his hands. He never got back in the sandbox to speak of. He put all the cars in his sister's lap. And by the time she got big enough to play in it, the cats had taken over the box. And that's a picture of all of my mom's grandkids except maybe one. Mama Hefton lived to be 107. At 103, Tulsa World interviewed her. The only thing I remember about the article is she said, I want to die before any of my children. I was 34 years old. One of her daughters that had just died was 81. I thought they were all just lucky they lived that long. But she said it's not natural. It's not. That's the last surgery Andrew had about 4 years ago. We all had great hope. Like Tron talked about, it wasn't to be. I guess that's the end of it. Tron touched on Andrew buying a duplex. He never had a job that paid over $11 an hour. He researched for months and months, probably a year or longer, looking for the right piece of property. And we went and looked at some. We would go down there and say, "Come look at this," and nothing was just right. And he called me one day and was asking questions, and he said, "I found this duplex, and I'm going to buy it." And I really thought he probably needed some money. I wasn't going to make him ask, and so I said to Andrew, I said, "Well, what kind of help do you need?" "Oh, Dad, I don't need any help." He said, I've got $20,000 saved. He said, I got the down payment. I just had these questions about what the process. And when he first got his job at Walmart, he was living in an apartment right behind Walmart. Literally could walk through the woods, across the gravel road, and be on a Walmart sidewalk. Boy, Donna and I was ecstatic, to say the least. No more walking and falling, and he fell beside the buses, and people have to help him up, and lo and behold, we go down there, and he's going to move. He found an apartment a little ways away. He could save $200 a month. We couldn't talk him out of it. Not only that, it was on the second floor. We couldn't talk him out of it any way, shape, or form. He was going to save that money, and he moved. And that was before he'd bought his apartment or his duplex. But he was just that committed to saving his money, and every month, like Tron mentioned, that he took the maximum amount of his pay and put in so that Walmart would match it, and he had a considerable amount in that retirement account when he passed away. A lot of us with a whole lot more means than that have never took the time to save our money and invest. And he truly took after his grandfather. I could stand here for a long time and tell stories about Andrew, but each one of these that got up and spoke have covered his life, and way better than I can. I just want to thank each one of you that had a part on this, for our friends coming out and family. It means the world to us. So we're all going to Courtney's house, and we hope all of you join us there.
I love to remember that will never change. I have you in my head, and though I'll never hold you, and I'm still asking why, I guess that this is goodbye. My dreams suddenly seem so empty. I could go on my own, but I feel like playing dead. And for what feels like the first time, and I don't have you here tonight, I guess that this is goodbye. We lived half our lives together, a cloud full of tears. There's a lot of weight to bear. And the sun, it may be shining, but there's an ocean in my eyes. I guess that this is goodbye. I guess that this is goodbye.
Bow your heads with me for prayer. Our Heavenly Father, as we come to close of our time here together today, we come to you with heavy but incredibly grateful hearts, grateful for the gift of Andrew's life. We thank you for his brilliant mind, his quiet humility, his radiant kindness that he shared with everyone he met, even when his own path was so imaginably hard. Lord, we ask that you wrap your comforting arms around Steve and Donna, around Christy, Brooke, Courtney, around all the nieces and nephews and all of us who miss Andrew so deeply. In the days and months ahead, when the grief feels heavy and we're overwhelmed by the unfairness of this loss, Lord, remind us that you are big enough to hold us. Our anger, our sadness, our questions. Comfort us, Lord, with your Spirit. We thank you, God, that Andrew is no longer fighting a broken body. We trust his exhausted spirit into your infinite compassion, a compassion that understands his journey far better than we ever could. And as we leave this place, as we go back out into the world to live our lives, Lord, let Andrew's life be our guide. Give us the grace to love deeply, the humility to work hard, and the courage to face our struggles with the same quiet bravery that Andrew showed us all. In your holy name I pray. Amen. Thank you all so much for being here.
Adios.